A woman asked a television network to give back some of the money she's given them over 27 years. That's the whole request, nothing more complicated than that. What she got back wasn't an answer about her money.
When a donor asked for her money back, a longtime supporter reached out to a television ministry and asked for something simple: return part of what she'd given over nearly 3 decades. That was the entire ask. No demands, no accusations beyond her own experience. What came back wasn't a financial answer at all. It was a harsh, personal attack on someone who had no part in the exchange, was never included on the email, and never had a chance to defend himself. Her name is Bonita Beth Brock, and she lives in Sikeston, Missouri. She has supported Daystar Television Network since 1997. Not a one-time gesture, but nearly 30 years of steady monthly giving rooted in trust. This past spring, after a wave of troubling revelations about the network, she decided enough was enough and put her concerns in writing. By then, plenty had already come to light. Investigations had uncovered a honeymoon trip worth around $100,000 charged to a Daystar card, a 7-figure compensation package, and roughly $12 million worth of real estate, 7 properties, owned by network president Joni Lamb. Underneath all of it sat the allegation that kicked off the entire controversy, that Lamb's own son and daughter-in-law believed she had helped conceal the abuse of their young daughter. The money behind the story. The compensation figures deserve a closer look because this isn't the first time Daystar has responded to a financial question by going after the person asking it. An internal document titled Final Salary Review for 2023, obtained by the Roy's Report, shows that in 2021, while Marcus Lamb still ran the network, Joni's salary sat at $436,750. By 2022, after Marcus passed away and Joni stepped into the president role, her total pay jumped to roughly $1.48 million. That's an increase of about 140% in a single year, and it made her earnings more than triple what Daystar's next high paid staffer took home that year, Chief Financial Officer Arnold Torres, who earned $300,000. Jonathan Lamb has said his father had instructed before his death that Joni's salary should equal what the two of them had earned combined. That's his account of his father's intentions, and it deserves to be included here alongside everything else. When the salary figures became public, Daystar's response followed a pattern worth noting. Rather than simply addressing the number, the network accused Jonathan of improperly taking an internal document in violation of his obligations to the organization and demanded he stop sharing salary details with journalists. Daystar did dispute the reported figure too, saying the actual number stayed under 7 figures. But the larger point stands. A question about money was met, in large part with criticism of Jonathan's behavior rather than transparency about the finances. That's the same dynamic that would show up months later in the response to Brock. Seeing both cases side by side matters. One incident could be coincidence. 2, following the same script months apart starts to look like a deliberate approach. A simple request, met with an attack. Brock's message to Daystar was direct. She explained that she believed her donations were meant to serve a godly purpose, and in her view, that trust had been broken. She made clear that donor money shouldn't be used to silence people. Having given since 1997, she expected her contributions to fund ministry work, not what she described as an extravagant lifestyle and mistreatment of people within the organization.
Her name is Bonita Beth Brock, and she lives in Socoxie, Missouri. She's been given the Daystar Television Network since 1997, and that's not a casual donor. That's nearly 3 decades of monthly gifts sent in good faith to a ministry she trusted.
She never asked for every dollar back, and she never specified an amount. She simply requested a refund and asked the network to genuinely reflect and change course before, in her words, it was too late. The reply didn't come from Joni Lamb. It came from a Daystar administrator and syndication coordinator named Barbie Harris. And instead of addressing the refund request on its own terms, Harris's response centered on Jonathan Lamb. She wrote that he had developed such a troubling drive for greed and control that he distorts the truth in order to damage his own mother and even his late father's legacy. That's the message sent to a woman who had given faithfully for 27 years and simply wanted her question about money answered. Not a breakdown of finances, not an explanation of policy, an attack on a man who was nowhere near the conversation. The financial argument and its limits. Harris did eventually offer a financial rationale, and it's one that organizations like this often lean on. She explained that once a gift is made, it legally belongs to the organization, not the donor, meaning returning it wouldn't technically be a refund, but a brand new gift going the other direction. As a nonprofit, she said, Daystar is required by law to use its funds for its charitable mission, which doesn't include giving money back to unsatisfied donors. She also described a two-fund structure, one for ministry and outreach, one for business and administrative costs, a setup she said Marcus Lamb had established years earlier, adding that family members' personal expenses come from personal funds, not donations. We asked nonprofit attorney Christine Jones, who has represented former Daystar staff, to weigh in, since this touches on a genuine legal question. She confirmed that separating ministry and administrative funds is a fairly standard nonprofit practice and isn't inherently improper. But she noted that once a donor gives up control of their contribution, it can generally be used for anything aligned with the organization's mission, unless the gift was specifically restricted. That's where things get murkier for Daystar, she said, since spending on mansions, private aircraft, and luxury trips could reasonably be seen as falling outside a television ministry's stated purpose, even if no law was technically broken. Jones raised a second, more pointed concern. Responding to a straightforward refund request by attacking a former employee's character isn't just poor judgment, it could carry real legal risk for defamation. In her assessment, the appropriate response would have been for Daystar to thank Brock for decades of generosity and return her money without pushback. Instead, the network picked a fight with someone who wasn't even part of the discussion. Not an isolated pattern. This kind of conflict isn't unique to Daystar. A relevant example, in October 2024, 4 members of Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas filed a proposed class action lawsuit alleging that founding pastor Robert Morris and other leaders had spent years promising, through sermons and public messaging, that 15% of tithes, an estimated $15 million annually out of roughly $100 million in yearly revenue, would fund global missions and Jewish ministry partnerships.
That's the sentence Daystar sent to a 27-year donor who asked a simple financial question. Not an accounting, not a policy explanation, an attack on a man who wasn't part of the email exchange at all.
A former church accountant said he never saw more than $3 million distributed to that cause in any year he worked there. The suit also claimed members were told they could get tithes refunded if unsatisfied, a promise plaintiffs say went unfulfilled. Last month, in June 2026, a federal judge dismissed the case entirely, not because the church's accounting checked out, but because courts generally can't intervene in how a religious organization interprets and allocates its own donations under a legal principle known as ecclesiastical abstention, grounded in the First Amendment. The ruling specifically noted that plaintiffs never claimed Morris personally pocketed the funds, only that the money went somewhere other than promised. That distinction, personal enrichment versus internal redirection, was apparently enough to keep the courts out entirely. Gateway's donations had already fallen 35–40% following the scandal, and the ruling didn't. Gay changed that outcome. Brock hasn't filed a lawsuit, but the same legal framework would likely apply if her situation ever escalated to litigation over how funds were spent. Courts would probably show similar reluctance to second-guess Daystar's internal financial choices. That's precisely why Jones's second point carries more weight than the first. The fund allocation debate may never reach a courtroom, but a specific, documented statement about someone's character, sent in response to an unrelated request, doesn't enjoy the same constitutional protection. Ecclesiastical abstention shields how a church spends money. It doesn't obviously shield what an employee writes about a person in an email. The other side. To be fair, Harris's email also included real figures. She noted that Daystar now reaches roughly 2.8 billion homes worldwide and reported a 63% increase in salvations over the past year. She referenced 2 Corinthians chapter 9, the passage on cheerful giving, and expressed confidence that Brock had given in obedience to her faith regardless of appearances. Harris also stated, despite claims she attributed to podcasters, that every personal expense for Joni and her family comes from personal funds, not donations. That's Daystar's stated position, in full, without alteration. Both Brock and Daystar were contacted for comment. Neither responded. Not a clarification, not a statement, not even a declination. What we're left with. What remains is a documented exchange, a specific quoted attack on a family member who had no involvement in the conversation, a legal defense about the nature of charitable donations that an attorney says has some genuine standing, and a separate, unresolved question about whether that same email crossed into defamation. We're not claiming Daystar broke any law. We don't know that, and the attorney we spoke with said she couldn't say either without reviewing the organization's finances directly. What is clear is this: a woman asked a simple question about her own contributions, and the response spent more energy attacking a man's character than addressing her request. Someone at Daystar made a deliberate choice to answer an uncomfortable question by invoking Jonathan Lamb's name instead of opening the books. That's not accidental. It's a pattern, one we've now seen twice, first around a leaked salary document, then around a 27-year donor's simple appeal. Whatever the truth about Jonathan Lamb turns out to be, deflection has clearly become a default response. 1 Timothy 6 warns that the love of money is a root of many evils, and that pursuing it has led some away from their faith into deep sorrow. That's not a judgment aimed at one person in this story. It's a caution for everyone involved, from the donor writing the check to the ministry cashing it. We can't say for certain where Brock's decades of giving actually went, but when a simple request for a refund is met with an attack on someone who wasn't even part of the conversation, that's not a financial policy. That's a choice, and it's worth calling out every time it happens. Thank you for watching.